The Life of Dwight Moody. Chapter 28, being read by Peter John Parisi, also known as Brian Dean. Chapter 28, Northfield Seminary. The reward of service is more service, was a favorite saying of Mr. Moody, and indeed it perfectly indicated his life work. One day, soon after returning to his native town, he was driving with his brother Samuel Moody over one of the mountainous roads near Northfield, when they passed a lonely cottage far distant from any town or neighbor. Sitting in the doorway were the mother and the two daughters, occupied in braiding straw hats. The father was paralytic and could do nothing for the support of the family. Thus the burden rested on the women. But though the father was physically helpless, he was an educated man, and his daughters had an ambition that reached beyond their present narrow horizon. The limitations of their condition and the apparent hopelessness of their future deeply impressed Mr. Moody. The sight of those women braiding hats in that lonely, out-of-the-way place resulted in his determination to meet the particular needs of just such girls in neighboring hills and communities. His brother Samuel undoubtedly aided impulse to this purpose. Mr. Moody had a peculiar love for his brother, which was the youngest and in the family. He was not strong physically, and his interests were necessarily limited. Like his older brother, he was fond of young people and was instrumental in starting a debate society at Northfield. He constantly regretted the limited opportunities the local schools afforded his twin sister for her mental betterment, and often expressed the wish that something more advanced might be available. In 1876, Samuel died, but not before he had fostered in his brother's soul a yearning to put such educational advantages within reach of girls living among the New England hills as would fit them for a broader sphere in life than they could otherwise hope for. Another probable source of suggestion was to purpose and method was Henry F. Durant of Boston. Mr. Moody made this gentleman's acquaintance in the 60s, and with him visited Mount Holyoke Seminary. During his Boston campaign in 1878, he was a guest at Mr. Durant's home. The latter had just founded Wellesley's College, and naturally his daily conversation was full of his plans. Mr. Moody was taken to visit the college several times and became a trustee. Mr. Durant's aim for Wellesley's College was to have a college founded on the Bible and to give advanced education, while always giving Christ and the Bible preeminence, recognizing the benefit of industrial duties as well as the intellectual training. He insisted on the students sharing in the domestic work of the institution. Mr. Moody saw this plan in operation and at once adopted it and started the Northfield Seminary. The purchase of a school site was characteristic of Mr. Moody. One day in the fall of 1878, he stood discussing the project with Mr. H.N.F. Marshall of Boston, when the owner of 16 acres of adjoining land passed them. They asked him if he would sell, and learning his price, invited him into the house, made out the papers, and before the owner had recovered from his surprise, the land had passed out of his hands. 3 or 4 adjoining lots were bought out of the course of a year, without their respective owners realizing that their barren farmlands had any special value. These purchases increased the estate to 100 acres, the greater part being bare, sandy hillocks, useless even for pasturage, but suitably located and commanding a pleasing view of the Connecticut Valley. In the spring of 1879, the erection of a recitation hall intended for 100 students was begun. With characteristic promptness and energy, Mr. Moody could not wait for a dormitory to be built, but altered his own house to accommodate the students. Instead of the 8 pupils as expected, 25 appeared. With this, the Northfield Seminary for Young Women was formally opened on November 3, 1879, classes being held in the dining room of Mr. Moody's home until the recitation hall was completed the following December. The 2 girls he had seen in the mountain home were among the first students. So intelligent were they that they soon justified Mr. Moody's efforts in their behalf. Ground was broken for the first dormitory, East Hall, in April 1880. It was completed the following August and was used to accommodate those who attended the first Christian Workers' Conference during the first 10 days in September. On the last day of this conference, at the close of one of the morning meetings, Mr. Moody invited those present into the chapel East Hall for the purpose of dedicating the building. After singing one or two hymns, Mr. Moody spoke as follows. You know that the Lord laid it upon my heart some time ago to organize a school for young women in the humbler walks of life who never would get a Christian education but for a school like this. I talked about this plan of mine to friends until a number of them gave money to start the school. Some thought I ought to make it for boys and girls, but I thought that if I wished to send my daughter away to school, I should prefer to send her to an institution for girls only. I have hoped that money might be given for a boys' school, and now a gentleman who has been here for the last 10 days has become interested in my plans and has given $25,000 towards a school for boys. And now, as we dedicate this building to God, I want to read you the motto of this school. Then turning to Isaiah chapter 27, verse 3, he read, I, the Lord, do keep it. I will water it every moment, lest any hurt it. I will keep it night and day. And it would seem that this promise has been more than fulfilled, for during the 20 years which has elapsed since the seminary has been remarkably blessed. In the cornerstone of each of these school buildings, proper has been placed a copy of the Scriptures. This is symbolic of the place that God's Word holds in the life of the schools. It is indeed foundation, cornerstone, and capstone of Mr. Moody's whole system. He recognized that all studies have their value, but believed their importance is increased if pursued in right relation to central truths. The curriculum of the seminary offers 3 courses of study. The college preparatory course enables a student to enter any of the leading colleges on certificate. The general course offers the same advantage in Latin, but affords more scope in electives. The English course, by omitting the languages, gives an opportunity for more extensive work in science, history, and literature. In all branches, the student is stimulated in independent thought and in investigation. Great emphasis is laid on the foundations of education. Hence, for those who are unable to pass a good examination in the fundamental branches, a preparatory department has been planned, which furnishes 2 full years of elementary instructions. One line found in the school catalog which attracts much attention and causes a great deal of pondering is this. The students perform all the work of the house. To the uninitiated, the hours domestic work to which he immediately introduced sometimes seems appalling. But whether or not the task is to mean drudgery depends almost entirely upon the attitude of the student and the spirit in which the work is done. Merry hours are often spent in the kitchen with congenial companions in the same cheerful performance of duties which are not always considered the most pleasant. A girl's experience in domestic science is widened, especially if the work falling to her lot be varied. If, in other words, she is a miscellaneous girl. The schedule of domestic work is arranged largely with reference to the individual's convenience and capabilities, and so as not to conflict with study and recreation hours. It is not the idea of the seminary to pay exclusive attention to the training of the mind and soul, but rather to develop a symmetrical womanhood. At least half an hour of outdoor exercise must be taken daily by all. The beautiful and extensive campus offering rare incentives for the fulfillment of this pleasant task. The finely equipped gymnasium is a much frequent spot. Basketball and tennis are favorite sports, impetus being given to games by friendly rivalry between the halls and by challenges between the different classes. Wanamaker Lake, a picturesque sheet of water, often witnesses gay groups of skaters in the winter months, and on a beautiful afternoon in June and in September is the scene of merry boating parties. Long walks and climbs about the surrounding country or other enjoyment forms of recreation. There are also lectures, concerts, and various sorts of entertainments, which help to brighten the winter evenings and to develop the social life of the school. Receptions and class entertainments are other pleasant features. Often on festive occasions, the unique social evenings in the different halls blend brightness with routine and draw friends more closely together. The current events club aims to give its members informed in regard to living history as to it is being enacted and recorded from week to week. The Young Women's Christian Association has in charge the various departments of Christian activity and keeps the students in sympathy with the larger movements in to make the world better. Last June, 1889, in a memorable reunion, the 20th anniversary of the seminary was celebrated. Words of love and gratitude reached the founder's ears on every side. Well might he rejoice in an almost incredible growth, from a modest beginning 20 years ago to the present enrollment of nearly 400 students with a staff of teachers and matrons numbering 39. The school property now embraces 500 acres of land, 9 dormitories, a gymnasium, a library, a recitation hall, an auditorium, and farm buildings. The effects of the Northfield training are lasting as hundreds of former students testify. Many who came to obtain enough education merely to get along better in life or to fit themselves for some lower sphere have had their whole course and purpose changed. Instead of leaving the seminary the irritable, self-centered girls they entered, they have gone out consecrated, self-sacrificing Christians who have found the joy and happiness that come in the service of Christ.